Okay, so I'm Sangeetha Wiley, and I am doing a global isolation chat today with Joseph from Hong Kong. So, Joseph, I'll get you to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Sangeeta. Very good to see you. And I am Joseph Gonzalez. I am presently the head of academic studies and the master's, the MFA program leader for the School of Dance at the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts in Hong Kong.
We met last year in Kuala Lumpur for that dance conference. And
Yes.
from what I understand, you've been in Hong Kong for how long now?
Well, I'm coming to the end of my 4th year in Hong Kong.
Wow.
So, it's a so cliched, but time really, really flies. Yeah, so I was in Malaysia before that at the academy in Malaysia for 22 years,
Mm-hmm.
and even that flew by really quickly. So Hong Kong has a much more global perspective. They are very interested in how they place themselves on a global map for performing arts. So their benchmarks are, Juilliard and those kinds of institutions. They're really setting the benchmark so high. It's taken me quite a long time to feel as if I actually know a little bit about what I'm supposed to be doing here.
You're being humble because from what I saw with the Malaysian dance school that you've headed, it was very impressive and very
Thank,
avant-garde, you know.
thank you.
And
Yeah,
you're
I really am honestly so surprised by how it all turned out. We are a multicultural society and we are a multiracial society. And that was what I wanted to bring into the school in a concrete, real and deep way, so that the experience that the students would have when they came into the National Academy of Arts in Malaysia was one of really embracing the cultures and the arts of someone else, and other members of our society. For the first maybe 8 years, we never even had an enrollment of a non-Malay student in the academy. So when I took over after 4 years, I think one of my plans and my visions, and one of the top on the to-do list, was to reach out and break these prejudices that people and preconceived ideas that people had. And sadly, Sangeeta, sadly, many people, no matter how much work has been done and how much has been said, many people still have those prejudices. But because it is my job, I have to do it. I see it as a responsibility.
and I read your paper recently, the one that talked about how you you keep the traditional forms of, say,
Yes.
Mak Young or the traditional art forms of Malaysia alive,
Yes.
considering that these are traditional art forms that aren't institutional based,
Correct. You're
right?
right, Sangeeta.
Um,
And that was what really attracted me to the institution. And I guess that's why I ended up spending 22 years there, because the philosophy with which the institution was founded was not created by me. And I came very much from a Western perspective, being trained in ballet and contemporary dance, having done some Malay dance in the 80s at university, but to really to be really surrounded and enveloped by traditional arts that I had no knowledge of. And my growth and upbringing would be very typical of anybody who had grown up in a city, because a lot of these traditional art forms are not thriving in cities, right? They're happening in villages in the northeastern state of Kelantan, where they have Mak Yong and they have the shadow puppet play Wayang Kulit, and a whole host of others. And what the founding fathers and mothers of the institution, and God bless them for being so far-sighted, said that this must remain at the core of the institution. So no matter what program you're coming to study, you will have to take, and it was progressive, and every year there was one core subject of traditional art. So whether it's shadow puppet play, Mak Yong, and then Bangsawan, which they call the Malay opera, It's not really opera, but this is the terminology used. And there was also an art form that was called Randai that was practiced by the Minang community that had moved from Sumatra to Negeri Sembilan, one of our states in Malaysia. And that was part of their culture, together with the plate dance, for example. So there are lots of these very exciting things that were happening in the school that I had no knowledge of. And that made me also think, so if this is traditional theater and it forms the core of the entire academy, then what is it I need to think about for dance? How can I parallel that within the dance school? And then began a whole, a 15-year, 20-year journey about looking into Malay traditional art forms. And you know what is really, really fascinating and sad, Sangeeta, is that the Malays form the majority of the population in the country. They form 60 to 70%. Malays and their subgroups. But the art forms that seem to be most threatened are the Malay art forms. Because from 1970s, there was this huge wave of Islamization, for one. And number two, I think because they are the majority, I think they tend to take it for granted.
That's very interesting.
The diaspora that has arrived in Malaysia and live in Malaysia, like the Chinese and the Indians, because they are the minority, and the minorities always feel threatened, they are so much more particular about maintaining their culture and their art forms. So you will be so surprised that Bharatanatyam, Odissi, and other forms are thriving in Malaysia. And many, many Malaysian artists are invited back to India during the Indian classical dance season because they are recognized for their excellence. And in fact, Datuk Ramli Ibrahim, who is the pioneer of Odissi in Malaysia, received the Padma Shri Award from the Indian government. And this, I think, is unheard of for a Malay gentleman from Malaysia to receive this award because of his work in Indian dance, How fascinating.
Outstanding.
And people, it's just outstanding work that, people, the Temple of Fine Arts, Sri Shankar Kandasamy, Ajit Bhaskar, and a whole host of other people who are, constantly working within their art forms and promoting it, but primarily within their own communities.
Right. And so you end up in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Let's get you back to Hong Kong, where you have all this rich background in so many cultures by now, 22 years, and now you're at Hong Kong. And what kind of work are you doing? What kind of work is
So very exciting in a different way. I think my job really here is to also bring that awareness of global cultures into the lives and experience of the students. But Sangeeta, I don't know what it is. I think it's my upbringing, I guess. So when we just always blame our parents for everything, right? So
that's our birthright, isn't it? Especially for an artist, I think we come to it sooner maybe, but we use that as fuel.
Yes, totally, So I think as I was growing up, I just had the feeling, I don't know whether my parents intended that, but I had the feeling that everything I was doing was just not good enough, I was never good enough at anything. And I was, if you get 98 marks for mathematics, the question is, what happened to the other 2 marks, So this is the kind of mindset, I grew up with. And when I reflect at my, childhood and my experience at school, and I was thinking, I was actually quite a good student. I don't know why I was made to feel that I was not, but, that's okay. I don't hold it against them. But that kind of mindset still exists. And it's so strong. And I think some of it is very good because I think it's always important to go back to look at what you do and to analyze what you're doing. So although I've written several books and I write papers, I then read something else that's written by someone else and I'm thinking, wow, this is really so much better than what I wrote, But at the same time, I'm driven by the fact that I need to keep writing because not very many people are doing that kind of writing in Malaysia. and they're not actually sending that writing out to beyond the, the fancy journals that only academics will read.
Mm-hmm.
So here in Hong Kong, I am also using the courses that I teach to actually improve my own skills, to actually make myself understand better the processes involved in research, the various issues that one could face when dealing with this. The biggest changes are going to happen in the next 2 years, and I'm making a proposal for something that I have believed in since I've arrived here, for the necessity to embrace greater diversity within the master's program. Yes.
So now you have some challenges, or do you, in terms of COVID?
Oh,
I'm sure you do.
I don't even know where to begin when we talk about these things, because it actually began not with the virus, but it began with the protests.
Great.
Yes. So in June of 2019, I woke up one Sunday afternoon from my siesta to this beautiful music, church hymns, sing Alleluia to the Lord. And then for a moment I thought, am I in Kuala Lumpur and Petaling Jaya in my church and hearing the choir sing this? It was really beautiful. It was peaceful. I opened the window and there were hordes of people marching down the street wearing black t-shirts and singing these songs. And this was early days, yes, of the Hong Kong protest. It was 2 million people marching down the streets of Hong Kong Island.
But singing this beautiful song.
It was surreal. And I actually went down and I boringly, I had to go and take my laundry and stuff like that. But I was also wearing a black t-shirt. So, as dance people often do.
Right.
So I walked down in my black t-shirt and automatically they assumed I was one of the members of the protest march, And the warmth and the generosity. You'd have people who are, old, much older than I was, and you have parents carrying young children on their shoulders, and they were offering drinks to each other. They were offering food if anybody had some. What a contrast to what is happening today, the social distancing that we are experiencing today. But that whole movement of humanity that had a shared cause, a shared belief, a shared purpose, was it was really unbelievable. It then reminded me of the Bersih walks that happened in Malaysia, where everybody wore yellow and marched for for a better system of the electorate process and so on, and other demands that they had. And in Hong Kong, they had demands as well. But that was so peaceful. And I don't think anybody realized that it would then escalate and erupt into the violence that it did. And from just peaceful marches on Sunday with a lot of hymns and songs, it then evolved into, spilled over into weekday protests. And then it just became so violent. And the police were everywhere, and the school was, of course, we were affected because the students' unions of the universities in Hong Kong were very, very active in this process. And you may have seen pictures of the students being locked down at Hong Kong University and Polytechnic University. And Hong Kong University is or was like a top 10 university in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So they have an incredible reputation for the academics that they produce. For it to come to the point where students are willing to really maybe sacrifice their education or for a period of time, but just sit down and protest and say, we are really not accepting this. My heart went out to them, And in the same way, the young students at the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts are also part of this larger milieu and this ecosystem. And they also felt that they had a role to play, and they wanted to play a role as young citizens of Hong Kong. And so then our classes in aesthetics and criticism and research became all about this. So I brought those issues into the classrooms at the master's level and at the bachelor's level. And there was a lot of expression of fear, of anger, of frustration, of sadness, and deep deep sadness about what was happening and what would be their future. You know, their future is so uncertain. But very, very interestingly and importantly, our school is a school that has students from mainland China. You know, we have students from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, all over the world actually. And we often have students from America as well doing an exchange for a semester. So there was you could feel the tension between the students who came from different places. But I said I wanted the classroom to be a safe space for discussion. I didn't want any finger pointing. I said the students who are sitting here do not represent their government's opinion or their government's stand. It's important that everyone realized this. However, if a student did have an opinion that was in line with their government's opinion, we'd have to accept that as well. And we cannot then, you know, boycott that student for any reason at all. You know, so we have to embrace it, but we are only going to discuss it if everybody is ready to have this kind of open mind and mindset about the discussion. And I was very moved by those discussions, and there were a lot of tears on both sides. On both sides.
You did have representatives on both sides then
Yes.
of the voices, yeah.
Yes. Because what was happening was, you know, the freedom of the availability of information in mainland China is very different from what is experienced by everywhere else in the world. So, you know, their perceptions are actually very different. And when they were shown information or something from a reliable press source, I think it was a shock to many of the students. And then there is this mindset of you know, young dance artists who are so focused on you know, almost you know, blinkered into thinking about their bodies and their minds and getting it ready for auditions and work. So this is like the primary driving goal of most of the students who come into this institution. And then there is something that's going on that's actually preventing them from training regularly. And this was very disturbing to them. In a very small way of looking at it, but it was valid. And we cannot say that that's not valid. So many things to juggle. So on the 18th of November, I think it was the 10th week of our semester, we actually had to shut the semester down because it was not safe for the students to come into school anymore. You know, the MTRs, the public transport was not working, and many of our students commute between 1 to 2 hours to get to college. So this was just not safe. So we were getting information from the police. We are right next to the police headquarters. We are right next to the Government Legislative Council building. So we are right in the heart of where the umbrella movement took place. So it's a real hot spot. And so we were very fearful for our students who actually went out. Many of them were tear gassed. So they had to run back into the institution. And because I lived so near, so I volunteered to be kind of a go-to person if the students needed anything. But it was really fraught, that the tension. I have never experienced something like this in an art school in my life, or just in life. So it was time for reflection and a time to take stock and to ask ourselves really about art and what does art mean, you know, and if I'm going to do a piece and choreograph or dance, you know, Giselle, or what is the validity of dancing that when all this is going on around you? And is there any way that we can bring that into that rehearsal? Is there any way we can bring that into the characters that you're meant to play? Can you think about Giselle being, I don't know why I'm thinking of Giselle, but yes, Giselle, you know, that she's being betrayed in a particular way, but not by a man, but perhaps by a system, by a government. Is that something that she can hold on to? And for that, she dies. But in her death, is she willing to save other people? Oh, very interesting.
Well, it's bringing, I mean, all art has themes, and I've once heard it, and I believe this: all art must be political. It's of the people, right? And so right now you're going through a very political, or you have been going through a very political time, and that's, I think, that's when art matters even more. That's
Yes.
when everything you do, like the conversations you have, like you said, talking about the criticism, all of that becomes very real and authentic and not theoretical anymore.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And that for the last, 15 years of my life has also been what has driven me as a teacher, as a writer, as an artist, as a choreographer, whatever hat I happen to be playing. And I realized that it's always been about that. It's always been about getting those voices out, the voices of the marginalized, the voices of the disenfranchised. They need to be heard.
Absolutely. That's, I mean, that's exactly the way I feel. It's the voicing up the voiceless. And then it's the intersection of how, and you've done it in Malaysia and in Hong Kong too. How do we create these intersections so it's not just isolated? And that might be a good segue into isolation.
Yes, you're perfect. So, so after that, sort of calmed down a little bit, we came back in January to start the next term, and then 2 weeks after that, we were told that the school is closed, all Hong Kong universities are closed, and we have to move into isolation. And we started really early on, so I would say that perhaps. Well, of course, we are right next to China.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, I guess, were the first to respond to the situation. And they imposed isolation methods and safety and, cleanliness and disinfecting systems within the schools instantly. I mean, they were so quick to implement this. But then comes the question about what do we do with our students between February and June? How do we engage them? Do we want to engage them? Do they need to be engaged? And the institution decided that they had to be engaged and they had to be taught online. We have over the last 5 years or so in Hong Kong, they have invested heavily in online learning systems. So it's a big, I think something like, I don't know how to translate it to US dollars, but it's about maybe 25 million Hong Kong dollars that was spent on this internet technology hub of the school, where they migrated all courses to having internet and e-learning support systems. So there's a whole team that can help you design courses and make your courses more effective and so on, without realizing that we'd have to use their expertise so much in this period of time. We had no idea.
But thankfully you have that, because so many people have had to pivot without, and sort of, yeah, we have things in place, but online learning for an institution.
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't, I perfunctorily place all my notes on these systems, but I didn't rely on it. I didn't think, it was necessary, because I'd still come to class and distribute notes. And now I realize, wow, I can save so much paper by just having them online.
These
So
are
this
the
is,
good things to come out of it, is that there are some good things about online learning. I mean, we miss obviously the interaction, and I can't imagine with dancing how much more difficult it is.
yes. So what we started doing in the first 6 weeks, we thought of how certain courses would be modified or taught with focus on the body, looking at the physical sensations, looking at strengthening and looking at flexibility, keeping the body supple and strong during this time.
There's a lot of people that can benefit from that.
That's right. That's right. Myself included. So how do we then think about, it's, and also in Hong Kong, we have the issue that most living spaces are tiny. You're talking about 400 square feet of living space for sometimes 3 generations of a family,
Oh,
So, yeah,
wow.
you have 6 people living in that 400 square feet. So often, you might find that someone doesn't actually have the privacy of their own room. And these are things that we sometimes take for granted. And we've had to think about it now, the issues of parity, the issues of equity, the issues of privacy. So, however, in the first 6 weeks, we felt that we'll just give them these online classes for the practice. We also reminded them that they could do certain sort of improvisation techniques, compositional exercises, and they would upload their little videos that they take on the phones. They would upload it onto the Canvas. That's our system that we use. And then the teacher would review it and give them feedback. It's a lot of work for the teacher as well, because some of these classes, you're looking at 30 one-minute pieces, maybe every week. So there is fatigue, but you have to do it. And interestingly, I find that I'm actually more religious and responsible about online feedback than I might have been when I'm actually seeing them face to face in a large class of 30 people, where sometimes some of the children or some of the students don't want to say anything.
Right.
You know? But here they are forced to say it because there is no other means of communication with the teacher. So I say, everybody, you need to write 20 words, 30 words, and you can also comment on your friends' feedback, but you can only do so after you place your own feedback. And then it becomes quite an interesting platform for dialogue.
So it's actually been more, almost more inclusive in a sense.
It absolutely
nobody slips through the cracks, really.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. That was a very interesting thing that I've discovered. And this, the students seem to be quite, they embrace the idea that there's greater flexibility about their time, that they don't have to do this at a particular time in the school, in the classroom, when they're so fatigued from dance rehearsals and so on. They can engage perhaps after dinner and they're a little bit more rested and, I have a little bit more time. Now I will look at what I have to do and talk through, talk to my classmates on this new platform. So I find that this engagement has increased actually in this period of time.
And would you say the engagement is also a different quality? Because I was talking to a friend of mine who said she's learned things about her colleagues at work who she spent 8 hours a day working with, but now that they're on this sort of video online format, some of them bring out guitars and they have little 5 or 10 minutes of whatever it is before they do their work, and they're learning things about each other that they never learned in years working side by side.
Exactly. I think that's really important and that's really valuable. I've learned about people who enjoy cooking. There's a new Malaysian hero. She's a bit of a YouTube star, and I talk about her all the time. A very simple young Indian girl who's, I think, about 28, married to a 29-year-old man now, and they have 2 young boys. And about 2 months ago, she only had 1,000 subscribers to her YouTube channel. And today she has about 550,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel. And she just cooks. Her name is Sugu Pavitra, for anybody who wants to look for it. SUGU Pavitra, Pavitra. And she cooks all these wonderful dishes. I do not cook at all, Sangeeta.
You don't? That surprises me. I think you are someone that I would expect to just whip up some beautiful, elaborate dinner.
I whip up something that I bought from the store. No, I don't cook at all. But I just enjoy watching people do it, And she's amazing. And she cooks these incredible curries and dishes that have become a sensation in Malaysia and in Japan, I hear. And the Prime Minister last week sent her a note and said thank you, and sent her like a tripod to put her, to record her things better. So she's just amazing. And just like, I think America has Dr. Fauci. So we have our head of our Director General of our Ministry of Health, Dr. Muhammad Noor. And his own story is so wonderful. He was a Chinese boy, poor family, adopted by a Malay Muslim family. He became a Muslim, went to university, became a doctor, married his adopted father's daughter, I think.
Oh.
Yes, so that's interesting as well. I hope I got that right. But he's just the kindest, most calm face that is delivering these messages of people dying and, what we need to do. And every single Malaysian, they're just forgetting about race and religion and class. And they're embracing these 2 people, Dr. Noor, who's at the top of his game, and, Sugu, who's somewhere else, bless
keeping
her.
the country together. We have Dr. Bonnie Henry in BC, British Columbia. So she's our provincial health minister, and we have a local shoemaker, John Flubach, who's international, but he's based out of here, and he's just designed a shoe for her because she wears a lot of his shoes, and you see them in the press conferences. She's become our hero for being that voice of reason, for being the firm. But our rates in BC have been quite low, and everyone attributes this to her messaging, which is
Isn't
great.
that incredible?
Yeah.
That's so incredible, right? How we can find a way to embrace people, for being a voice of reason, a voice of calm, providing us some sense of security, some sense of comfort. And we reach out to them, and everybody is, and it was Dr. Noor's birthday, I think about 2 weeks ago. And I think he had a million messages from Malaysians of all walks of life saying, thank you for the job that you're doing. And every time his response is, I'm not doing this alone. There's a team of great people who are working so hard. And he keeps talking about that, but we just love him, so it's just wonderful to have these kinds of heroes emerge in this time of crisis.
I think we get both sides sometimes. What about Hong Kong?
Yes. In Hong Kong, I think the above and beyond, the truth is that the people of Hong Kong actually are very smart. They have really learned from the SARS experience about 15 years ago. So they actually are very well equipped and well informed as to how to protect themselves. So they are not actually waiting for a directive from the government to do so. And in fact, because the majority of the population of Hong Kong, about 7.5 million of them, have this kind of knowledge, they actually feel that the government is working too slowly for their liking.
Okay.
However, the government has managed to keep the numbers really, really low, and they have been taking precautions. But because the people of Hong Kong are so on the ball, they are thinking, hey, the government, you're 2 steps behind me. You got to catch up. You have to catch up. And then there's this tension between the chief executive officer, who was elected based on certain promises that she would have made, the executive of Hong Kong. But it seemed to be now very in line with Beijing, the Beijing government. So there's incredible tension between the people and their representatives. So the voice of the young people who are fighting for democracy, these are the voices that actually are still being heard more loudly and clearly, because the issue of the pandemic, as great as it is, and as badly as it has affected businesses and education, it is still the voice of the people fighting for independence and fighting for rights that is taking precedence and is really at the forefront of the Hong Kong environment still. And
I guess how they exercise that is now online, as opposed to, because they can't.
Yes, it's
gather.
mainly online. They have a really good, online press that is impartial and that talks about these kinds of issues. And I find that very happy to note that so many artists in Hong Kong, from all genres, primarily theater and dance makers, are highly politically motivated and socially aware and conscious. And that is something that I relate to a lot, and the work that takes place primarily within contemporary dance and theater are really addressing their responses to these situations. So it's a tough time for artists, as you know, everywhere. So at the moment is a little bit, it's a lull. I think they are using this time to, reflect. Some of the major flagship companies who have government grants are still functioning as normal, and the dancers are, and all artists and employees of these major flagship companies, there are 9 of them in Hong Kong, 3 music, 3 theater, and 3 dance companies, are all continuing to receive their funding. So there's no issue there. So they're just thinking of how can they justify their funding by, then placing things online that people can view. So the socially motivated young people, and maybe not so young people, are still talking and thinking through dance and the arts as to how they can reflect what's going on in Hong Kong through the work that they do. And I think this is hugely important. And I really respect so much the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts. And I really must say that, because in the period of time when the protest was going on, the management of the school did not ban the students from hanging banners that were critical of the government, or putting up posters that were critical of members of the faculty. Could be myself or the director or anyone. And I respect them for saying that action would not be taken. Although I know that the students were not happy that eventually at some point they were taken down, right?
Right.
But
But at the same time, there was no repercussions.
yes,
Okay.
not at all. You know, it didn't affect their grades. And I kept telling them, you know, if this was Malaysia, you would be in jail, because the Malaysian government would not tolerate this kind of confrontation with authority and power within a government space. So I think this really, really was something that spoke of the maturity of the Hong Kong citizens and the Hong Kong community and the Hong Kong government up to a point. So I took a lot, and I took a lot of learning from that. I think it was very important for me to see, because for a large part of my life in Malaysia, I did works that were reflecting what happened at that time. And many people often spoke to me and said, it's quite amazing that you're not being hauled up to the police station to be questioned. But because it was dance, and dance is often something that leaves so much to be interpreted, right? And there's no language involved. So people could think that it's something else, you know, and they're not so threatened by it, perhaps.
Yeah, it's
So,
different when it comes to the written word, isn't it? There is
yes,
censorship.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds like, in terms of what's been happening, what with the protests and then going into isolation, at least this issue has not disappeared, that people are still, you know,
Oh, yes.
motivated, right?
Oh,
Because that could have easily gone the other way. And so
yes.
that's impressive too.
Yes. I am so impressed with their stamina, their courage. You know, it takes a lot of courage. I mean, you know, in my mind, I can remember the picture of the man in Tiananmen Square, right?
Right. Yes, I remember that
But,
too.
but in Hong Kong, they are like, you know, we're willing to do what it takes, you know.
It often is the students. When you look back historically, it's the
Yeah,
university students who are the ones who have the courage.
yes,
Somehow we lose that as we get older, I think,
yeah,
some of us, you know,
yes.
and we do it through our art perhaps, but to actually physically stand in front of a tanker, for instance,
I know.
you
It's
know,
incredible human courage, and the will to continue a fight that you believe in. And I really take my hat off to all these students, and the students of dance as well, who will say, okay, I have to go and attend maybe a protest meeting at 3 p.m., but I have to do ballet class at 7 or 9. And they will do it, you know. They don't
right?
make any, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I hope that they are also reflecting on themselves in this period of time, and looking more positively at how they responded to it, and their responsibility towards their art and their choice of career, but also as a citizen of Hong Kong.
And how about you personally, going through this
Yes.
isolation, considering everything you have to do?
Yes, I have really been incredibly busy. Besides, I taught about I have 7 classes a week
Wow.
on Zoom. So each class is between 2 to 3 hours long. So it's very exhausting. But so preparation for their classes take a long time. But when I'm not preparing for a class, I'm also attending a course on that's being offered by the school on staff development, perhaps, on how to become a better teacher using these kinds of platforms. I have also completed an 8-week program on mindfulness. So I am very happy.
Wonderful. And
Yes,
that's because of the pandemic? Is that something that you had the time to do?
yes. And
Yeah.
I decided that this was what I was going to do at this period of time, because I wanted to find a way to deal with the stress that I was going through, you know, the fact that I'm not interacting with human beings. I live 5 minutes away from the school, so I walk to school every day. I get into my room and I'm in my room by myself.
By yourself. Yes.
Yes. So this is a very unusual experience. Generally, in institutions, you know, students are walking, they're coming into my room, they're having a meal, and so on.
And I also know you to be very popular with the students. You're also very outgoing, and like you have this thing, and I would consider you to be, maybe I'm wrong, an extrovert in that sense.
It's interesting. I guess it's true. And, I also did a course on Introduction to Psychology in 8 weeks. Uh, and that looked at these issues of, are you an extrovert or an introvert and so on. And it's great to find time to sit down and think about yourself.
And what did
I've
you
really,
discover about yourself?
I discovered that I haven't figured it out yet. And we are different people in different situations.
That I
Um,
agree with. I think somebody told me a term, omnivert. So you're basically extrovert and introvert, just depends on the situation, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed my online learning. So I did a course on mindfulness. I did a course on the introduction to psychology, and I did an 8 week course on e-learning as well. That was
Hmm.
offered by the institution. So quite a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I feel lazy now listening to you.
no, 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 no. And then I have like a once a week chat with members of my friends and family, and we play a game of cards online. We spend
Wonderful.
Yeah, we spent about 3 hours laughing like we were, 20-year-olds with no cares in the world.
What game do you play? Is there one game that you play? Or do you just mix
Sorry?
it up? What card game do you
Yeah,
play?
so we play, so I'm a Malayali.
Yeah.
So there are these Malayali games that they play, like it's called 28. These are card games you play with a pack of 52 cards. It's just wonderful. And it's just, nonsense, and it's fun, and it's really light, and just wonderful to be able to interact even on this platform. And perhaps because of this platform, we are interacting. We wouldn't normally find the time to do it because everybody is very busy with their different lives, and we're all living in different parts of the world. So it's very good. What else have I been? I'm toying with the idea of writing a paper with one of my colleagues on the subject of online teaching. So I've kept myself very, very, very busy. um, I would have loved to use this time to develop some kind of a exercise habit. Unfortunately, I think I'm failing
There's
miserably.
there's only so many hours in the day, I think. I think you have to sleep at some point, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, so I hope that that will be the next thing that I sort of, you know, I'll be 60 in a month.
Oh,
Yeah,
happy
so
happy early birthday. That's a
thank you,
milestone.
Sangeeta. So it's a kind of a milestone. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, so
And you
something.
don't look at all, by the way. That's the thing. Like you have this youthful, I don't see a single wrinkle. Not a single one.
Oh, when my close friends say that, I'll say, well, it's 30 years of using the right moisturizer.
So I should start that.
Yeah, I mean, I have real problem skin that I inherited from my dad. So he had very bad eczema and psoriasis, which I have as well. So I've always been very, very careful about trying to keep it away from my face, at least.
Yeah.
I
So
don't
are
if
things
it.
opening up? Are you going to be able to get together with people for your 60th?
No, probably not, but it's fine.
Right.
Yeah,
You'll play cards.
yeah, we play cards, or maybe some of my nephews and nieces might organize a chat or whatever.
They'll make you a cake, but you won't be able to eat it.
Right. But
But
it's
you'll
huge.
get to see it.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm happy to be alive and happy to
Yeah,
be healthy, happy to be useful, and still working on trying not to make so many mistakes in life. You know what I mean? You just go through.
absolutely.
So I think on one of my status, I don't know which one it is. Basically, it's trying not to screw up. So
I think, and the thing is that we will continue to screw up, but it's the screw ups that somehow, hopefully,
yes,
we learned
yes,
from.
yes, yes,
And the
yes,
other thing is that like it's funny because what we have taken for granted, or like things like birthday cakes or whatever, in the grand scheme of things, really don't matter. We've put so much importance on things
yes,
that we can live without, and we're
yes,
learning that we can live without. And I think
absolutely.
that's one of the great things about this time is I've called it a reset, and because it can be a chance to reset
Yes,
yourself in so many ways, and whether it's like through learning or to learning I think going deep within or whatever, whether it's physically, we have a chance, which we probably will never have again. Well, hopefully we'll never have
Yes,
again,
yes, yes.
right? To pause. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and to not have to run around, because now you sort of look at your life and think, well, how much was I running around and I didn't need to, you
Yes.
know?
So do we really need to travel 2 hours for a 1 hour meeting? Or can we just not do it on this platform, so it's just going to hopefully save a lot of time and a lot of energy, keep the cars away from the highways if they don't need to be on the highways. So I think now, well, I hope they will think, well, we did very successful and meaningful meetings over the last 2 months, so why don't we continue that? Yes, maybe once in a way we can come back together and share a cup of tea and have some live interaction. That'll be great, but we don't need to do it every single time.
I think that's it. It's the balance. We can use this platform when, for some of the time, and that does keep the pollution down. Look, at the whole world is actually almost taking a sigh, a relief, or some kind of, it's just a chance for the earth to kind of go, thank you. Thank
Yes.
you for
Oh,
pausing.
absolutely. Yes.
You
Look
know,
at the trees and the sky and the rivers, and everything is
and
so
the
much
air
air,
smells good. We
so
were,
much
I mean,
cleaner.
we are on the ocean in Vancouver. And just the other day, I said to my husband, I smell the ocean here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
It's
think I've smelt
incredible.
it where we live.
Yes.
So yeah, everything is, and so these are the pluses. And of course, there's all this tragedy, which is really, really, you can't dismiss what's happening to so many people and to their families, and how that's going to affect people mentally. But we have to have that mindset of not sitting in that place of being victims and just somehow,
Yes.
you know,
Yes. And our heart goes out to every single person that has been affected in this
mhm,
situation, the people who have died, the frontline workers, the people who have lost their jobs, and they are at the forefront of our consciousness. But at the same time, we have to think about, okay, what is it we can do for ourselves in this time? And what are the good things that have happened? And like you talk about the earth is breathing a sigh of relief.
mhm.
And I think for ourselves, questioning how we use our time, questioning how and who we meet, and what we talk about, and our interactions with people, and how meaningful are all these things. And I think this will change for sure.
I'm glad you said that, what we talk about. I just said that today to somebody. I said it takes out the distractions, it takes out the drivel, I call it, all
Hmm.
the noise of talking about things that are not authentic or not necessary. Not that
Yes.
we have to become as serious people. We can still have fun and humor and all that stuff, but I think we're being a lot more conscious of our conversations too. And I think that's also something that, and as an artist, that also filters into our work. Like,
Yes.
you know, what are the conversations we can have with the work we do, with the
Yes.
dance we do, with the play I'm writing? What is too much? What can I extract? Because in this sense, if time is kind of non-existent, and at the same time we are quite conscious of time, and then it may be short, who knows. So what are we going to do with the time we have, and what are we going to do with the art we have, and how do we put that all across? And that's also something to grab people's attention. If we're going to go online with some of these platforms, with some of these um, forms of art, how are we going to get these messages across and hold people's attention, and how do we do that?
Absolutely. Very true.
Mm-hmm. So much to think about.
Indeed. Indeed.
But we do have time. Is there anything else you would like to?
No, Sangeeta, I think I'm good. I think, it's been great talking to you and sharing the journey of the last 2.5 months, and then with flashbacks over to last 25 years. So thank you for this time, and thank you for taking time to talk to me.
Oh, thank you. You were on my mind when I started this, actually, and I should have asked you sooner. So I'm very glad that you said yes. And I
Oh,
loved
pleasure. Absolute
hearing
pleasure.
your story. And I especially loved the context of what was happening in Hong Kong before as well. I think that's very important because so many of us can easily forget that, right? So thank you for
Yes.
that. Stay well, stay healthy.
Thank you. Yes, you too, Sangeeta. Thank you so much.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
You
See
too.
you.
Bye.
Bye.